nervous because I'm here now.
Hey guys, welcome into another episode of 410 Sports Talk. My name is James Haskell, along with my co-host Glenn Martin. Really excited to have a new friend and guest on the show, Zach Neel from the Washington Wire, to talk about our upcoming matchup against the Washington football team. Thanks for coming on the show, Zach.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is the first thing I have to ask is what is the consensus that you're feeling from the team and the coaching staff about their owner Dan Snyder right now amidst all this all this craziness going on around him?
Wow, we're starting with the big question, huh?
Yeah. Getting those out of the way first.
So I don't know how much I can tell you as far as what the team and the coaches feel. I mean, they're going to give you the straightforward answers. We don't really worry about that. We're focused on football. However, I can tell you that fans can't stand him. Fans have been on this, get Snyder out of there, get him to sell the team. They've been thinking that for years now. So all of the stuff that's come out this past year, especially this past summer, it's really nothing. I mean, it's new, obviously, but it's not that shocking because no one can stand him. Everyone kind of thinks that he's not a great guy. I'll leave my personal feelings about it aside, but I mean, it's kind of the biggest thing with the whole team is that no one really wants him there, but you're not really going to get him to sell the team because it's his childhood team. He loves it. He loves owning it. We're going to kind of hope that the NFL sees whatever they find in all the investigations and they might force a sale, but I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah, that was going to be my follow-up question. If he was going to be eventually forced, to sell the team, and I don't really know what the bylaws are, what the conditions are to determine that. But it sounds like that's the only way he's going to, relinquish power, right?
From what I understand is that the NFL, they're investigating now. Depending on what they find, they can either have all the owners come together and say, hey, this we can't allow this. This just looks bad for all of us. The owners themselves can force him into a sale. But the NFL, like Roger Goodell, probably couldn't by himself say, hey, you need to do this. It has to be all the other 31 owners to come together and kind of force him out. So We'll see if that happens.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about this name. I mean, right now they're the Washington football team, but do you have any inclination or any inside information as to what this name will eventually be and when the decision will be made?
So inside information, no. Fans are really in favor of the Red Wolves. I've seen that's kind of the biggest driving factor is like that's what a lot of people really want. There's Warriors, Capitals, other stuff like that. Some people like, but I mean, I personally am a fan of the Red Wolves. I think it's a cool idea. Sounds all right. As far as timetable, I don't think we're going to see anything definitely not before the 2021 season. I think it could be a year to 16 months here. They're trying to get polling. They want fans' opinions. They want advertisers' opinions. They really want to do this right because you don't want to be in a situation where you choose a new name and then all of a sudden everyone hates it and they're trying to change it again. So they're really trying to do this once, get it over with, and really get the right idea.
Yeah, that's smart. We've heard a lot of different names, and in fact, I think if I'm not mistaken, there was a guy that copywrote or claimed rights to a lot of potential names to try and make a buck off of it. I thought that was pretty interesting as well. But one of the other questions we wanted to ask you, as far as the Redskins as a team, every team, of course, has aspirations and their goal is to go to the Super Bowl, but realistically, like, what are their team goals for this year, right? What are they looking to accomplish to consider it a successful season?
Really the biggest thing, I mean, this is not a playoff team right now. Everyone's seen, I mean, sure, we won week 1 against the Eagles. That win looks a lot worse than it did at the time now, considering what the Eagles are. Besides that, I mean, this isn't a playoff team. This is maybe a 7-8 win team if everything goes perfectly. What they really want is to get a new culture in there and find out what young guys they have on the roster that can be with this team going forward. There's a lot of old guys, old veterans on the roster still. We don't know if they're going to be around much longer. I mean, Brandon Sheriff is a perfect example. He's on the franchise tag right now. They're kind of holding out to see if he can stay healthy this year, if they want to pay him next year. But he's on the IR. So people like that, they're trying to see who can they rely on going forward because they're trying to build an actual sustainable culture, a sustainable team, and see if they can win a few games a few years from now.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a quick follow-up on that. This was going to be a question I was going to say for a little later, but selfishly, we are looking for pass rushers, and you guys got a lot of them. You got a lot of
Yes, that's
draft
what we
capital
specialize in.
up on the the front end of that defense. And so my question, a guy like Kerrigan, and then some other vets. So with the fact, just kind of like you mentioned, they're analyzing whether or not they want to keep some vets or move on from them. Do you see them as being a potential trade partner, not necessarily for just the Ravens, but being active in trade as the season progresses?
I really thought you would. I really thought they would. I mean, you bring up Kerrigan. He was someone that I was saying all summer, like, hey, why don't you trade this guy? We've got Chase Young, we've got Montez Sweat, we've got a great D line, and Kerrigan is really I don't want to call him a backup because that's really disrespectful to the great player that he is, but he's in that situational Chris Long type of pass rushing role where he's not out there on every down. And I thought they could have gotten something for him. He's got a little bit, his contract isn't the best. He's getting paid, I think, 11 and a half, 12 million per year. So some teams might not want to bite on that with his age getting up there, but I think there are a few players. I mean, Ryan Anderson has been talked about in trades a little bit too, because they really have so much depth on that defensive line that they're not using it all. So, but to answer your question, I think they do like that depth, and it's kind of proving to help them out a lot now. I mean, they've had Matt Ioannidis go out this past week, and they're kind of need to tap into that depth now. Chase Young injured for next few weeks at least, or week to week, but we don't know when he's going to come back. So the depth, it's nice to have right now in times like this, but I don't know. They might pull off a trade, but I could kind of see them standing pat.
Wow. Yeah. That would be interesting to see with as you mentioned, a team that's not, doesn't have its sights set on the Super Bowl. But you mentioned that culture change that they're hoping to make happen this season. So I wanted to ask about Ron Rivera, because we both were super happy for Ron and thought it was a great move by the Washington football team to bring Ron in. What have you noticed since from a franchise level, since Ron has taken over, what type of changes have you noticed?
He really just gets these guys to play hard. I mean, we say what you will about Jay Gruden and the last coaching staff. I don't think he was the hardest head coach to play for, because he really didn't get on you too much if you were slacking off in practice. I mean, there was word coming out of the first week of training camp here that they're practicing hard, and Rivera was getting on them if they were not running from drill to drill. So that's one thing we heard a lot in the offseason. And I think so far this season, you've seen it come to fruition a bit on the field, because look, week one, they were down big at half. They came out and mounted a second half comeback, never gave up. Same thing happened last week with the Browns. I mean, they really didn't give up. They kept trying to come back. Obviously, it didn't work in the end, but you can see that this team really doesn't have quit, and they never really believe that they're out of it, which I think is a lot of what Rivera brings to the table.
Yeah, it's great to hear, because I think, like Glenn said, we were both really excited about that. And more than anything, I'm sure that they needed a cultural restart, right? Just to kind of give an opportunity to turn over a new leaf. But the interesting part is that while they're going through that, they have a quarterback, of course, that from us, to be totally honest, obviously played for Gruden, and now he's playing for Rivera. For me, and I'm sure for Glenn, from the outside looking in, hasn't been lighting the world on fire. Relatively pedestrian. But I want to know, from your opinion, and then those of the players and the organization, like, how do they feel about Haskins now, and then how do they feel about him, into the future?
So there's still some good feelings about him, but patience is starting to run a little bit short. I mean, one of the biggest things is that he's only got, I think, 10 starts under his belt. So this guy's still, in terms of experience, he's still a rookie quarterback. He's still got to take his lumps. He's got to get the rookie mistakes out of there. We saw a lot of them this last week. I mean, 4 turnovers against the Browns really lost them a winnable game. They could have won that game if he even had 2 interceptions instead of 3. So there's still some things that you want to see him clean up, but we've seen a lot that he's a good player. He's got a great arm. When he makes the right reads, when he doesn't try to do too much, he can sling the ball downfield, and he's led them on a couple of great drives this year. So I'm still holding out hope. I think a lot of Washington fans are still holding out hope that he can be a guy. But Rivera said this past week that, hey, there is a cutoff point where if he doesn't get better, he didn't say when, but if he doesn't get better at this certain time, doesn't show us why we need to keep him around, they're going to move on. So I think everyone's kind of watching to see how he continues to progress. And the key is that we do keep seeing him take steps, no matter how big or how little they are. As long as he's not moving backwards, that's what we want to see.
And how do you feel about his leadership? Like, how is his leadership perceived? Because last year there were some videos like, he's trying to prod along the offensive linemen and stuff like that. And so how do you feel about him as a leader, or how does the organization feel about his leadership skills?
Yeah, that was definitely a tough look last year.
Yeah.
That I think is one of the biggest improvements this year. I mean, that's not something you really see on the field in the X's and O's, but the main story that came out of that first win against Philadelphia is that when they were down, I forget how much they were down in the first half. At halftime,
17-0.
It was 17-0, right?
Yeah.
So when they were down in the first half, Rivera went. He wasn't able to give the halftime speech because he was getting an IV for his cancer treatment. And Haskins apparently stood up to the rest of the team and gave a rising speech and got them fired up and ready to come out, and it worked. So, I mean, there's been a few stories like that he's really trying to be the leader of this team. I think it's working so far, but I mean, players aren't going to want to listen to someone that's throwing 3 picks a game. And when he's saying, hey, let's go, like they're going to be less inclined to listen to him. So it's kind of a give and take. You got to have both of them to be a great quarterback.
Yeah. And I certainly hope he makes it at least through this whole season as the starter, because as much as I applaud Alex Smith for his incredible recovery, when I hear 45 plus surgeries to get that leg back to where he can, run around and play with his kids, I really, I'm sure he wants to get back out there, but man, that seems like, man, just go off. He's made enough money. Go off and play with your children and be happy.
I completely agree with you. I mean, all the word is that they can stick him in there tomorrow, and Rivera has said, I'd feel comfortable going to him in the game. And well, that's great to hear. I don't think anyone wants to see that, because no one would be able to take a deep breath while he's out there on the field. So we love him too much to stick him into harm's way.
Yeah, I got to agree. Well, flip over to the other side of the ball. You mentioned Chase Young earlier. He was, talked about as maybe even better than Myles Garrett when he was coming out, and up there with the Boses and all that. Has he lived up to all the hype, and what have the reviews been so far?
I think he's been great. I think it's hard to say that he's exceeded expectations. Like, as you said, I mean, expectations were through the roof when he came out of the draft, but he's absolutely lived up to everything they could have ever wanted in a number 2 pick. He's leads the team with 2.5 sacks. He's unfortunately injured right now. I got a little bit banged up against Cleveland, but he's really done well. And we thought that he might have to transition. I mean, we've talked about how good that defensive line is. We thought he'd have to kind of work his way up the totem pole to be the top dog, but right there, first snap of the game, first day, like he was the top guy, and he's their number 1 D lineman in terms of snaps, in terms of production. I mean, he's the guy for a long time now coming.
I mean, I saw same thing in training camp. I don't know. I felt like in college he was not the thickest guy. He was definitely a strong guy, but I don't know what he did in the offseason, but he looks huge.
He just works, man.
Oh my gosh.
He works so hard.
Man, it was impressive to see him throwing around NFL offensive linemen like it's nobody's business. I was just shocked by that and quite jealous, to be honest with you. But one of the questions I have is about this idea that, some people say that there's a rivalry based on proximity between the Ravens and the Washington football team. Do you feel any of that? I honestly, like, as lifelong Ravens fans, I haven't felt that because they're in the NFC, we're in the AFC, so we don't meet very often. Yeah. But I don't know, down on, southern part of 495, do they have that feeling towards the Ravens?
If they do, I don't think they should. I mean, do you want to buy into a rivalry where you're the clear-cut worst team in that rivalry? So I don't know. There may be some arguing over the fence in your neighborhood if you're a Washington fan and your neighbor's a Baltimore fan, but I don't see a big rivalry. They don't play very much. They just happen to be close to each other.
Yeah, I agree. Well, one guy we were super hype on when we were doing our draft videos was Antonio Gibson. Although he had limited touches in college, man, did he make the most of them. And me and Jimmy, I think in one of my mocks, I had Antonio coming to Baltimore. So I think a lot of people are surprised to see when they released Adrian and kind of gave that role to the younger guys. What have you seen out of Antonio Gibson? What type of player can he turn into?
He's not there yet, but I really think that he can be a great back in the NFL. I mean, he's elusive and he breaks a lot of tackles. I forget. I know what the stat was before week 3. I don't know what it is now, but he's near the top of the league in broken tackles and making guys miss. He doesn't yet get a lot of run. I mean, they're not a very run heavy team. I think he's averaging probably 9 to 10 carries a game, but he is the clear cut number 1 back in their backfield. And that it started slow. I mean, we saw Peyton Barber get the bulk of the load in week 1, and then they've slowly transitioned to Antonio Gibson. So he's really good when he has the ball in his hands. Unfortunately, they're usually playing from behind, so they tend to pass more, but when he gets the ball, he can do a lot with it.
And what about Bryce Love? Because I think a lot of people were expecting him to get the goal line work and maybe the first and second down work. We haven't been seeing a lot of him.
We haven't seen him at all. I mean, Bryce Love hasn't played an NFL snap. I mean, he came in. I'm a big Pac-12 fan, obviously being from Oregon, and so I watched him a ton in Stanford. And when Washington got him, I was stoked. I think he's a great back when healthy, but he just hasn't been healthy. And so the past few weeks, I think he's been a healthy scratch. I mean, he practiced in training camp and everything, and he's been a disappointment so far just because we haven't seen him. And because we haven't seen him, he obviously must not be up to it. So I don't know. We're still waiting to see. Hopefully he can get in the games later this year. But to be honest, I have no idea.
Gotcha. When I look around the league and I saw a question posed as who's the most underrated players in the league. And I look around, like one guy I look at is Scary Terry. I mean, Scary Terry McLaurin gets no love nationally. I mean, there's a few guys that don't, but he's certainly one of them. I know he doesn't have the best quarterback getting him the ball, but he seems to always get open. He's getting the best teams or the opposing team's best cover guy, and he seems to always get separation. So what are your thoughts on Terry McLaurin?
A lot of people look at that rookie draft class, that the wide receiver class that he's in, and they applaud DK Metcalf for all the stuff that he's doing. I'm just thinking, if you put Terry getting balls from Russ Wilson, oh my gosh, can you believe what he'd be doing? So I think he's an incredible player. His yards after the catch are absolutely unbelievable. I mean, he's up there with DeAndre Hopkins as far as broken tackles in the secondary. So he's really elusive. He's got a great catch radius, strong hands, and really quick. You ask 10 Washington fans who their favorite player is right now. 9 will say Terry, the other one will say Chase Young. I mean, there's young guys like those. Those are the people that we're trying to build around, and there's a future with. I mean, hopefully Haskins can be in there with them at some point, but those are the guys that you really want to keep around for a long time in Washington.
Yeah, that kid's always making highlights. It's just ridiculous. So, I think that this game is going to be more intriguing than people. Of course, we're confident, but the Ravens fans, I think some of them are overlooking this game. And I think based on, like you talked about, the depth on the D-line, the reliance we have on the run game for our success, this game could become more intriguing than what a lot of people, I think, are envisioning. So how does the Washington football team go in there and come out with a victory?
I talked to our friend Matt Stevens, who covers the Ravens for NFL Wire, and he said, I asked him this very question. I said, there's not much hope on Washington's side that I'm feeling so far this week. So what do you think? What are your weaknesses? How do we beat you? And he gave a good answer. He said, hey, like some Ravens might be thinking like, okay, this is a cakewalk. Let's get back to business. Let's kind of do this. He just said, come out and hit us in the mouth. And I think that's something that Washington can do. I think they can get physical. I think they can really muddle some running lanes. That defensive line is so good. And it's just a matter of playing hard and not giving up and not acting like you're the little brother in this situation. So I think Washington, if they can kind of harness that energy and that anger from last week's loss, I think they go out and give them a game. I'm not the most confident as far as the outcome, but I think they can at least make it somewhat interesting.
Yeah, certainly a game that you wish Marshall was still lined up on the inside and the interior of that offensive line, because man, they didn't look like the same offensive line we saw last season, and Washington can certainly test them out. So what is your prediction? What is your guess on the outcome of this game?
Knowing what I've seen from Washington so far, I think it's going to be a blowout from the Ravens. My first score prediction earlier this week was 38-13. I've seen the Ravens offense when it's clicking. I think they're hungry after that Chiefs game. I just think that they're going to try and run the ball down Washington's throats. And they've got a great D-line. they're not great at stopping the run. I think they're 16th in the league as far as yards per game allowed on the ground. Their D line's a little bit banged up too. So I could see, while you say yes, there is a chance that Washington can make this close, I think there's a bigger chance that the Ravens just kind of put it on them.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you what, I wouldn't be mad about that score. That's for sure.
No, we need
Double
one of those
them up,
around here
some,
after
for
last
sure.
week.
Woo. Oh man, yeah, we're really feeling it. So that, like you said at the beginning, it's a tough position for the Washington football team to be in, based on the fact that we just got punched in the mouth and we're not too happy about it. Yeah. So, but we're excited for the game nonetheless. I'm sure you are as well. We appreciate you coming on the show, Zach. Why don't you let our viewers know where they can find the stuff you're working on, and what it is that you're working on.
Yeah, so I work for Washington Wire. You can follow us on Twitter at Washington_Wire, usatoday.washingtonwire.com. You can follow me personally on Twitter at Zachary Neel. Updates to the games, updates to the weeks, all that stuff.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, man. We appreciate your time. Have a great evening. Enjoy the coast out there, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Have a good one.